Well, welcome to the Disruption Lab, where we bring you face-to-face with visionaries reshaping industries, pioneering new paths in entrepreneurship, and pushing us into the innovation economy. I'm here today with my next guest, and this is actually kind of cool for me because this is our first studio recording for the Disruption Lab, but I'm here with Craig Moore. How would I describe Craig, or like the intro on Craig Moore? So here, let me see if I can get this. Factually, Craig is currently, I believe, Partnerships and Special Projects Manager at the DeBruce Foundation, co-founder or founder and executive director for Black Excellence, Inc. I think board chair?
For the Heartland Black,
board chair for the Heartland Black Chamber here in the Kansas City region. Yeah. I mean,
interim.
I'm just trying to figure out, you know, how many like, can we do the whole episode with just your titles?
Pretty much, man. My wife don't know about half of them. So
yeah, that's fair. All right. We'll keep this on the DL then. But you know, my experience with you has been with Keystone primarily. Mm-hmm. You know, I've known you longer than that. I mean, you know, our first interactions were over a decade ago, I think, back at the Sprint Accelerator. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But, you know, Craig has been my partner in, you know, doing this work here at Keystone. And like I've told a lot of people, I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for you, man. Mm-hmm. So thank you for everything you've done here.
Appreciate the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to dive right in, man. I want to start, first of all, with your career journey and some insights. So, as an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder and, you know, community engagement person and somebody who's been involved in this ecosystem for a while, what was your inspiration for the work that you do today?
You know, the inspiration was really just my own journey. I think that when I was preparing myself to go to college, preparing myself for what that was actually going to be, I actually didn't know what I wanted to do.
Sure.
The things that I did know was that I had an older sister who was a basketball scholar, so she got full rides, and I seen the reaction that my family and the community had to that, and I was like, okay, that's the bar. And so I had a quiet talk with my mom during my 8th grade year of middle school, and was like, I need to go to Schlegel so I can be able to get in the band. And I felt music was my way to get that scholarship. I ended up learning to read music very quickly.
Yeah.
Got my scholarship, but when I got to college, I was still like lost. I mean, because I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish.
Right.
And then I was introduced to what is now called Enactus, but at the time it's called SIFE, Students in Free Enterprise.
Okay.
And
so this was a chapter where you were going to college.
Oh, yeah.
I know they got one here at UMKC, very active.
Yep. So when I was in college at University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, my counselor introduced me to that group and was like, you can get a scholarship by joining this group, become an officer, and that's where the entrepreneurship bug really bit me at that time.
Okay, all right, so I would put that's like one of probably those impressionable things that happened for you from an entrepreneurial perspective.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. I started doing parties, so the first thing I started doing was events.
Okay.
We had some really good fashion shows, and then some of the fraternities realized I had a knack for doing events. So we started doing some things with them, and then I started doing some things with the radio, just internship-wise, just to try to keep dollars in my pocket. But then I decided to come back to KC. You know, dollars, like the federal dollars that I needed to stay in school kind of ran out. Mm-hmm. And so coming back to KC and just trying to replant that flag of what I was doing really got me back into the entrepreneurship, or got me introduced to the entrepreneurship scene in KC.
So being an entrepreneur and being an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder are very different things.
Oh, yeah.
And I think having the experience of being an entrepreneur is important. But what really was, what were those pivotal experiences, or what were those things that drove you towards fostering an entrepreneurial ecosystem, especially in, you know, a community that's been historically excluded from the innovation ecosystem and innovation-led entrepreneurship?
Yeah, man. I did an internship. I don't know if you remember a company called One Dog with Austin and Zach Hurst.
No.
That was my very first internship, and they actually sold to YouTube, and we ended up having a communications company called Because Matters.
Okay.
And then I was introduced to DeMarcus Weeks during that time, and that's when we started U-Hoops.
Yep. And that's when I met you.
Yeah, and that's when we met.
Yeah.
And that's when I just got submerged into the ecosystem. Casey Sourceling, all of the things we did, 1 Million Cups. And during that time, there were so many barriers and unknowns that we didn't know as such a young company. That when I decided to part ways, I decided that I wanted to just be a support. Like I wanted to help other entrepreneurs. And that was kind of like the position I had with DeMarcus. When DeMarcus had the idea, I was like, I know what it takes to build, organizational structure just from my family past and things like that. And that is what I brought to the table. And I realized I can do that for a lot of different people. Mm-hmm. And so just being able to, talk to entrepreneurs, especially those from our community, especially in Wyandotte County. We have a lot of businesses that have grown from there, but not a lot of ways of understanding like how did they actually grow these businesses. And those businesses that were there, they hit a lot of barriers. They hit their head a lot, and you don't really see them truly scale beyond, those 3 streets in Wyandotte County that you drive down. And so for me to be exposed to the type of mentors I received, to be exposed to the Sprint Accelerator, I just felt like that was a missed opportunity. And at that time, I felt led to kind of bridge that gap between those who really want to grow businesses, and that was my ultimate thing. I wanted to work for myself.
Yeah.
So if you want to work for yourself and you want to have the right connections and understand how to strategically do that, that's just kind of my own individual journey that I wanted to kind of bring to the fold.
Yeah, no, it checks, man, and it's so from there, the work that you've done with Black Excellence. Mm-hmm. So, what was the catalyst for starting Black Excellence, and what did you hope to achieve when you first started the organization? Yeah,
so originally, before we were Black Excellence Incorporated, we were Black Excellence Kansas City. Mm-hmm. This was an original idea from Kiana Sinks, and she came to me, again, understanding that I had this background in entertainment, but then also this passion for connecting the community. Me and her were on that like-minded journey. And so what we wanted to do was just curate spaces for the different silos of Black professionals in Kansas City to be able to meet and just connect. But then COVID hit. And so we probably had 2 very big successful events. It garnered a lot of social capital for us. But finding a way to pivot during COVID was kind of hard.
Yeah.
And we started a couple of social media campaigns that kind of just got conversations going, allowed us to continue to highlight some leaders that were in our space. But then when Kiana decided to work for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum full-time, it provided me with the opportunity to start fresh and rethink about what those initiatives are. And along with my board, we decided that we didn't want to just become another program. We didn't want to just support entrepreneurs, even though we did that in many different spaces, but like, how can we be the connector of all these resources? We realized that, during COVID, of course, George Floyd happened, and you had all of these organizations who wanted to give to the community, but honestly, we didn't have the infrastructure to receive all the resources, let alone report back what the impact was for those resources. And so we decided to take up on that mantle to figure out how to drive those resources to the right people, make sure that those organizations who are receiving those resources are connected to each other. So then that way there's a shared impact that everybody is having. But then also we realized, in a lot of the work that I done, you meet a lot of other leaders and we're all spread thin. So how do we ensure that there is a pipeline of leadership coming from our community who can really drive change and help things as things continue to shape?
I think that's one of the things I've noticed is, we talk about the number of organizations that are out there supporting various elements of the ecosystem, various elements of, various communities and things like that. But and now there's this huge push towards collaboration, but it takes resource, right? And it takes people who are actually leading the collaboration, right? And if you embed them in one of those organizations, sometimes that gets difficult.
Yeah.
So I think you've probably run into this.
I mean, that's why I got 5 different titles.
Yeah. That's fair.
You know, because there is so much. I mean, I even took on, I'm the president of my HOA now, because there is so much representation needed in so many different decision-making spaces. But then also to be able to even be in that space, you have to have your own foundation. Like it's a lot of what we talk about with kids. Like you can't take a hungry kid to school; they're never going to learn because all they're thinking about is where their next meal is going to come.
That's right.
And I think it's the same thing for budding and emerging leaders. Is that if I'm constantly worried about how I'm gonna put food on my table or if my bills are being taken care of, there's no way that I could think about the community as a whole. And my biases come in because I'm thinking about what I am going through.
Absolutely.
And not what everybody else is going through. And so we wanted to provide just an opportunity for people to learn how to navigate those spaces, but then also give them the strategic resources to gain that foundation that they need to be real leaders.
So tell me about the key programs and resources that are available through Black Excellence.
Yeah. Again, this is about leadership development and tracking metrics. And so one thing that we've, when we were going through our discovery phase, is that when it comes to authentic data around the Black community, it's often skewed because of misconceptions of what's happening with that data. And 2, is that data going to be consistent for us to really make true decisions? But because when you think about the census, decisions are being made based off of those numbers.
Absolutely.
And so what we wanted to do is create a mechanism or create a community that felt safe to tell us the things that were going on with them, but then also, and safe enough to be able to input that into a platform or input that into a survey that allowed us to really understand like what are the needs for our community. And so we built a learning management system / CRM system called Proximity, which gives the feel of a social media platform, but it's a closed community that you can, as an individual, can go on there. And the goal for us is for you to identify the resources you need to grow your household income. And so we actively recruit organizations around the ecosystem to put in their resources, we help them with developing digital curriculum, but then also we are all sharing the same survey engagement. And I think that's a key piece for a lot of organizations is, what is the data that I'm collecting, and is the data that I'm collecting impactful? And then am I able to really measure the impact of my program to that baseline data? And that's what we geared ourselves up to do with Black Excellence, is to just solve that problem. Focus on your program, focus on your community, but bring them to this platform to where we can truly track their engagement. We can track your impact along with that engagement. And then that way everybody now has this shared resource of me as an individual. I know now where to go to be able to grow that household income. And then me as a resource provider, I can see how my resources are being impacted and also find opportunities for me to grow my services.
Okay, and that's Proximity. So that's a digital platform where you got expansive reach, right, across the community.
100%.
You also have a hands-on, cohort-driven program, right?
100%. Because, it's our philosophy that if you have a solid foundation, and especially in Kansas City, and you give yourself to be open to finding the things that you need to strategically support yourself, you can truly grow your household income by 30% over the next 3 years, 10% a year. And that's whether that's sharpening your investment skills, whether that's opening up that business that you want to open. That could be if I have if I'm bringing in a lot of income, but I don't know where to place my giving, so then that way I can have a good tax write-off. Like understanding those small elements can truly help you increase your household income. And so it wasn't enough to just put all of those resources on the platform. We really needed to put a confined space. And so we built a leadership program called Ascend.
Okay.
And Ascend really just takes all of the resources that Black Excellence has been able to curate over the last few years into a 10-session process where you're getting racial healing and racial navigating, you're getting financial literacy, and actually you're working with somebody one-on-one on what your individual budget is or what your business budget could be as well. But then also you're getting just leadership development and strategy development for myself and the team on that 3-year strategic plan. Like, what is it in 3 years that you want to accomplish? What are the resources and connections that you need to be able to accomplish those things? And then how can we as an organization ensure that we're steadily pumping in resources into our platform for you to be able to get connected to those things?
Nice. How many cohorts have you run?
So right now we're actually on our 3rd cohort.
Okay.
So we did our pilot cohort in partnership with Evergy and Urban League, where we had about 10 participants go through there. I'm proud to say that out of those, we've had business started, multiple people get promotions in the midst of the program. We then did a in-house version of it with the Reach Healthcare Foundation, because we have an affinity to really support the many Black nonprofits in Kansas City. And so we had 10 of those individuals go through and kind of review how they are shaping their nonprofits, especially in this time. But then also they were able to get some financial support as well. And then now we're on our 3rd one that is actually open now. We're doing it again in partnership with Evergy. And we're looking to get at least 30 people into this one now. To really grow and have that expansion.
Now, if somebody's interested in applying or being a part of the cohort, where do they go?
They can just go to the website, go to our Instagram. The application is open in our links. The goal is to have a running open application, so even if we cap it off, your application is still accepted to be considered for the next cohort as well.
All right, so I want to take a step back. We're talking about your career journey a little bit, and you said something about running a couple big social media programs when Black Excellence, when BXKC was kind of first started during the pandemic. Social media manager, though, is not it's not the first time you've had that title, right?
No, we bringing that up.
No, so I was gonna say, so you have a career, you have part of your career that was spent as a music promoter and spent in the music industry, right? And then you also have part of your career where you were a social media manager for a pretty well-known company here in Kansas City that a lot of people are aware of, right? So let's talk about the music promotion thing. What got you into that? Was it just your background in college?
It was the background in college, man. When we were working for the radio, we were actually, so there were, at that time, hip hop artists were going to historically Black colleges and trying to find interns. And so T.I. was the first one that came to Kansas City. So you seen us with like the Grand Hustle t-shirts, and like they would ship us all of this like merch and promotion to put everywhere. And I just enjoyed it. It was an opportunity to let local artists from Little Rock or from Pine Bluff to kind of get on this stage. I was a little bit of a janky promoter back then too, because we didn't really have the money, we just had the clout. And so getting into that, coming back to Kansas City to do the same thing, man, was just interesting to say the least, you know. But when I was in Kansas City, during that internship phase, a guy named Jay White reached out, and he had a music conference that he wanted to bring to Kansas City. And so there was really, I think I met him just through a mutual friend, and he just put all his trust in me. He was like, hey, I'm from the Kansas side, you're from the Kansas side, I need some good eyes down there. The guy who he had before kind of messed him over on some of the things that he were doing, and I don't know, it just burned in me, and I was like, you know what? I immediately started a company. It was called Platinum Image. He was my very first client, and for months we did a college, like a small college tour. We did a community college tour. Where we brought in some of the local artists that we had on the bill, and we would promote the concert or promote the conference. And the conference was successful in the sense of the community got what they needed, but we were actually in the red when it all ended. And so to compensate me for that, he offered for me to move down to, or he actually offered me to visit him down into Texas for a couple of years. And then I met his PR. and that's who I mainly worked with. And then she actually offered me a kind of paid internship to work for her PR company. And that's really where I got my media experience in. We were some of our clients were like the Floyd Mayweather Foundation, Triple C's, which was Rick Ross's Maybach Music before it was Maybach Music. And my sole job was to find all of them press in some type of way.
Now, were you working in Kansas City when you were doing this?
I was doing a little bit in Kansas City. I moved to Las Vegas for a little while with her, where she put me up in a hotel.
What was it like living in Las Vegas?
It was terrible.
Yeah,
it was terrible. Coming from what my grandmother would say, a chicken switch town like Palm Bluff.
Yeah.
And then going directly to, not directly, but I came to Kansas City for a little short time, but then going to Vegas for that, it was just overstimulated. Yeah. And my schedule was flipped completely. Like there was no daytime work. Everything was from noon to midnight, especially with those artists trying to protect their image in all different types of ways. Became very overstimulated for this young, small town kid. I would say small town at the time at Kansas City. And so I decided to just move back and try to see if I could do it here. I failed miserably at being a PR firm for a hip hop scene in Kansas City. Every time I talk about it, I refer back to the Will Smith scene in Fresh Prince where he says, what is 10% of nothing? Nothing. And that's kind of what I went through for years in the Kansas City scene. But, my goal was to really just build artists, build the industry, did concerts for quite some time. Then I ended up working for Strange Music. And I ran their street team department for about 1.5 to 2 years. And that was me actually now being able to be in a position to find volunteers, just like back in the Grand Hustle days when I was working at Grand Hustle. I knew what it was to be able to identify the students or identify the fans that really wanted to promote, this music that they truly cherished. And, me sending out thousands of promo materials to over 200 plus street teams across the nation and sometimes overseas, depending on if the tour was going that way, was really my big step into the music industry.
You mentioned failing as an entrepreneur, and you and I have talked about this a lot. What did you learn from that experience, though? For me, it's only failure if you don't learn. Right?
I learned that market research is important. For me, me having now this Rolodex of contacts, I'm talking TV stations. I'm talking majority of East Coast and West Coast radio stations who I talk to on a regular basis to get these artists on. And coming to Kansas City to think that I can activate those same contacts when I don't have the same type of talent to be able to give to those contacts, I should have done a little bit more research. I should have asked, those contacts hey, I'm moving to Kansas City. Are y'all even interested in the artists that are coming out of Kansas City? And that was my biggest crux, because coming to Kansas City and then talking to that talent about the connections that I had, I wasn't looked at as a resource. I was looked at as a way out, and a lot of them didn't have the true financial capacity to really support me. And so I ended up taking instead of upfront jobs, I took percentage jobs, and then I ended up becoming a manager because honestly, they didn't have the artist development, they didn't have the content, they didn't have the music that they needed for me to even really be in that PR position. And so if I would have just did a little bit more research and just talked to a few more people, I would have found that out a whole lot quicker.
So many entrepreneurs have good ideas, but they haven't tested the market or just ask the questions, right?
Man, that's it. That's it. And really see if that's what the market wants. But it caused me to pivot. I pivoted a lot, and I just kind of became this jack of all trades in the entertainment scene, which I felt was the value add for Strange Music when I went into that space.
Yeah. All right, so I mentioned it, so I can't let it go, man. I know, you're dreading this.
I am.
Social media manager, who'd you work for?
Man, this was a true pandemic job. Shout out to my wife.
Fair. We all had something like that.
So pandemic was all shut down. I was doing contract work at the time, and so contract work was null and void. And my wife, she's like, hey, here's this job that I found on Craigslist. Check it out and tell me if you feel like it's something you could do. And I'm like, yeah, this is, posting on Facebook, running ads, creating some content and doing some little bit of website development. I've done that because I had to be the jack of all trades. And I show up, and this guy comes at the desk with this long blonde hair. And he's like, hi, my name is Tristan from Jungle Law. And I'm like, God dang it.
So was it your idea to do the taping with the live animals? That's what I want to know.
It was not. It was not.
Okay,
it was not my idea. That was something that was there before me, but it was a true passion.
Yeah.
Like when it came to animal cruelty, when it came to animal asylum, like that was what really got them into this space.
That's wild.
But it didn't make money.
Right.
And so the thing that Tristan understood was what I didn't, was what was his market. And he knew what it took to be able to attract people's eyes. He knew what it took to be able to get people to remember things.
Yeah.
And that's where the antics came out, and you could see it in the billboards on a regular basis.
Man. I mean, you got to imagine it's effective. He's still doing it.
Man,
so,
listen.
Yeah.
And so I ended up like revamping their entire website, and then we ran the billboard contest.
Yeah.
It was two campaigns that I feel very proud of in that space. Was the billboard contest, which was people were submitting their ideas about the billboards, and then we were actually like putting them up. We were like, oh, that's a good idea. Like, let's go do that one. That's a good idea. Let's go do that one. And we gave cash prizes out to the ones that were successful. But then there was another one where, at the time, branded clapbacks were like the thing. Yeah. Like you would see Wendy's doing clapbacks. Yep. You would see everybody doing clapbacks. And Jungle Law was not a social media source that had a lack of comments, to say the least.
Sure. Just look at the social media. Yeah.
And so I think it was just me inherently being who I am, seeing some of these comments without even asking. I just started responding to some of them. And I remember Tristan coming to me, and he was like, yo, what's going on social media? Why are we getting so much engagement? And I'm like, well, because some people are saying stuff, and I'm just like clapping back at them. You know what I mean? I'm saying little tidbit stuff. And so he was like, man, he was a big fan of The Lincoln Lawyer.
Yeah.
So he had me go. He had me go watch the movie, and he was like, this is how I want you to be on social media. I want you to be the Lincoln Lawyer on social media. You come to us if it's like legal advice, you come to us, but like you. And so for the entire time that I worked for there, I was the social media guy, and then I would make memes all the time just about like Tristan and the Lincoln Lawyer, or his fiance and some of the work that she was doing. And so yeah, that was my short-lived time as a social media manager.
That's great. So one other of your roles that you're no longer in that I do want to kind of touch on, because I think it hits the entrepreneurial piece pretty big. So you worked for Venture for America for a period of time. Mm-hmm. And so what was Venture America, and kind of like what was your kind of the last role you were in when you were at Venture for America?
VFA was a nonprofit organization where we supported students who wanted to be entrepreneurs. We felt like lived experience was the best experience that you can get when it came to entrepreneurship. So our goal was to connect them to high growth startups, so that they can be able to have close proximity with the founder, see what it was like to kind of be a part of that environment, but also contribute to the growth of that environment. And so we spent, I would say like seasons recruiting from colleges, having them go through a training camp, exposing them to entrepreneurial programming, and then giving them to about 13 different cities. They had their choice of 13 different cities that they can go find a job at. And so starting off as a Kansas City director, that was my thing, recruiting those students, getting them connected to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and then making sure that they have what they need to actually become founders themselves. That involved to me then becoming the director of entrepreneurship programming, where I've actually constructed all of the programming for the organization when it came to early stage entrepreneurs, but then also overseeing the impact of all of our other entrepreneurial programming as well.
What was your big takeaway from the VFA experience?
Man, my biggest takeaway is just the slow development that's needed to really build an idea. I think that in the 2 years' time, and that's kind of like the season that the fellows came with us, in the 2 years' time, they were exposed to 4 steps of ideation. They were exposed to validation challenges. They were exposed to meetings with financiers and VCs to really understand the playing field. And the most thing that I constantly had to coach people on was this takes time.
Yeah.
And small impact is better than large failure.
Yeah.
And I think that was the biggest thing, is that the development that you're going through or that you're doing for this idea, if you can do it in a very small way, if you can do it before you even think about the app, have you done it manually? What is the manual process for you to get this done? And do you understand that process well enough so then when you're talking to whoever your engineer is of this app that you're developing, or your architect of this app that you're developing, that you can clearly identify the steps that they need to be able to do it? And so that was the biggest thing, is just taking your time and taking it at small chunks. And the small chunks is providing you with the data that you need for those VCs to be able to take those big leaps.
Yeah, we talk about entrepreneurial speed and, agility and some of those types of things, but you forget, most companies, like, it takes 7 years to get to like that.
That's it.
That growth curve that everybody talks about, that hockey stick or whatever.
It really does, man. And it starts at the smallest thing. Is just what I lacked in my own journey was asking questions.
Yeah.
I made a lot of decisions based off of assumptions. I thought that my lived experience was the same experience that a lot of other people had. And, it was actually when we were developing, like, Proximity was already developed, and we had an event not too long, and it was the very first time that I asked a large crowd, how many of you all, because they were mostly black professionals, how many of you all want another app on your phone? And nobody raised their hand.
Yeah, what? Like, what are you talking about?
And so by that time, it was too late. I've already invested so much into the app and things like that. But at that moment, I realized I needed to pivot. I needed to rethink. And so if you ask those questions early enough, it can help you alleviate so much questions and just barriers for you to actually be successful.
Yeah, for sure. It always cracks me up when you've got a founder or someone that walks in and he's like, we're going to develop an app and people are going to download it. And I'm like, oof.
Man. Are they though?
Yeah. Are they though? Yeah, it's a higher mountain to climb than you think it is. So I don't want to move on to the next set of topics before we talk about DeBruce a little bit. Mm-hmm. So there, the partnerships and special projects manager role that you're in at DeBruce. What kind of initiatives are you leading? What kind of focus do you have there?
Yeah, my biggest initiative right now is just enhancing the collaboration amongst our partners in Kansas City.
Okay.
We are huge on our goal of statewide adoption of the Agilities across the nation, but to be able to really have that, people have to understand that the Agilities are a true shared language. In any grade band, in any industry, these Agilities were identified as the 10 ways to talk about your skills, the things that you like to do and the things that you are good at doing. And the more that we can have our partners like Great Jobs KC, who has a partnership with the Missouri Department of Corrections, but they're not talking to each other programmatically, that's where I come in, is that I identify ways for them to be connected better. So then that way the population that they wish to serve is actually having real impact.
And Agilities, quickly, so Agilities, the Agile Work Profiler, those things, how do those things work in helping people discover and kind of advance career exploration or opportunities?
Honestly, Black Excellence was an early adopter for the Agilities. Yep. That's how I was introduced to it. And so the AWP assessment is basically, it's in the same realm as your Strength Finders or your Myers-Briggs types assessments, but it's not as prescriptive. And so what this does is, what they have done is they worked with the Department of Labor Statistics to identify these 10 skill sets in every job that's listed up under those codes. And that is then reflected in this assessment that you take that just takes you through about a 15 to 30 minute, depending on who you are, assessment, and it gives you out your agilities. And then we have these tools called the Career Explorer tools, where you now have these results that you can then go through, like our occupation decoder, and I'm gonna put in my top agility, I'm gonna put in the industry that I wanna be in, and it will give you hundreds of jobs that fit within there, and then you can select it, identify the agilities needed to do that job. You can identify the potential pay that you can get with that job, and then also what the education requirements are.
Okay.
And it's our belief that having these tools, applying the agilities within school curriculum, within workforce development curriculum, will increase for an individual their career literacy. And I like to give the example of my own way of using career literacy. This is back in those pandemic days when I had to get up out of jungle law. I worked for an advanced manufacturing company, and I originally was in their warehouse, but a job came up for them to be for a buyer. Had no idea what a buyer was. I looked it up on YouTube, and because I understood my agilities and I understood what the agilities were, I was able to identify the skill sets needed to really do that job. And so in the interview, when he asked me the question, you've never had a background in any of this, but why do you feel like you can do it? Because I had career literacy, which was understanding what that job is, understanding the resources needed to make that job happen. I then had the confidence to say, these are the skill sets that I bring from my past that would transfer into this. And the thing that you do need to teach me, though, is I don't know the names of all these elements that we're shipping.
Sure, the specifics.
The specifics, and that's something that I can learn on the job, you know. And so, being that and having that confidence to be able to do that, then gave me a job, and now I'm sitting in the front desk, and I was always, and at that time was up for a promotion in that same job. I would have never had that if it wasn't for the agilities. And that's what the agilities provides for a lot of individuals that we're impacting now. We're over 100,000 AWP completes in the last year, which for us, as we see the industries changing, as we see new jobs popping up, it's going to be even more important for people to identify skill sets within language that they probably don't see on a regular basis. But then as they read and learn more about it, they can see themselves in those jobs.
I always, when I look at people's careers, especially people who've had like multiple roles, multiple jobs, I've always been a big believer in hire for attitude, train for skill, right? And so I think you're a great example of someone who's done a lot of different things, but it's all been accretive to your, like you've taken something from every one of those jobs to kind of advance where you're at and advance what you're doing. So all that said, I want to talk about kind of today's like current environment, right? Like things are strange. Things are, it's strange. Not even the right word for it, but when we talk about DEI, we talk about diversity. For us, what we've talked about a lot is in the innovation ecosystem, diversity is critical. Diversity of perspectives and thoughts and attitudes and certainly backgrounds. Like if you're talking about innovation, you have to have all those things, right? This Medici effect, right, that we've always talked about. But also when you look at the Just Capital's Just 100 just came out. They just announced today or yesterday, I think, the new Just 100 come out. So like corporations' role in our communities is not just as businesses, they have a more important role. So when you think about the craziness that's going on right now with, DEI being kind of thrown under the bus and just thrown out by the federal government in a lot of different ways, what do you say? You can pause the programs, but you can't pause the purpose. Where do you think we're headed? And what do you, where do you think we're headed with some of these things? And what's, I think, your perspective based on your experience and kind of where you've been sitting on some of this?
I think in the beginning, this is a very fear-based type of reaction, or the initial reactions are very fear-based, and on both sides. One side is very fearful of their community not being seen as in power anymore, And then there's another fear of communities who have truly strived to be in power, to really see all their work just be dismantled very quickly. And so I think in this initial phase, people are just fearful, and they're gonna need help and support navigating it on both sides. We talked a lot in our Ascend program about post-traumatic slave syndrome, and that is something that I feel like people need to recognize more and more, that our biases are gonna show up in so many different spaces, and in spaces that we and then also biases that we didn't feel like that we've had, but probably have been inherently passed down to us. And so right now I think that we're in a little bit of an identity crisis.
Yeah. We're
trying to figure out who we are and who are we in this system. And, and I think that's kind of what sets me up for my initial response to that, is that I'm fearful. I don't know what's going to happen. When you think about the work that we have done as Black Excellence, and then to get the collaborative partners that we have ready for types of resources, when we talk about the Heartland Black Chamber, and the work that they've been able to do to work with Emmanuel Cleaver to be able to get federal funds down to Kansas City, not just for them as a diverse group, but for the Hispanic Chamber, for the LGBTQ Chamber, for the Asian Chamber as well. That was a $4 million dedication to a building that's going to bring all those chambers into one to really drive impact. And now one is on hold, but we know that based off of the language that was created for that, it's probably going to be dismantled and not funded any further. And for that type of work, I mean, you think about now the financial impact of that building that is on these groups have been disproportionately supported. That is an additional level of just fear, I guess, laid on top of what we already have to navigate just as individuals. Under all that fear, it's either, the fight or flight. And there are a lot of people they're leaning into fight. And so you will see probably now more than ever, more and more people collaborating, more and more people recognizing the need for stronger numbers together. And that is just going to be its own, I don't want to call it a revolution, but essentially that's kind of what it might be. We might have to rethink how our country is. We might have to rethink what our democratic parties are. And there are strong voices who are leading to that, but then also there are people who are really just trying to figure out how to navigate these next 4 years and hoping things come across. So I'll say right now it's kind of hard to tell like what's going to happen. But I will say that specifically in the Black community, resiliency is our thing. That's what we've always been through. We were able to recreate and build millionaires in times where those things were not supposed to be things that were sought after. And I think that nowadays we have the resources and the leadership and I would say the passion that if we are hit with these things that are coming down, like trying to unearth MLK's, secret documents that if he had, or trying to suppress Black History Month to now be American history. These things these tactics are not tactics that are unfamiliar to the community, and we just have to lean into ensuring that we have sustainability as we fight.
I got two things I want to ask you about related to this then. So on one hand, you've got, it always strikes me as funny when people are talking about, American history, just in general, because we're such a young country. Yeah. I think if you've studied global history, or if we still lean heavily into the teachings of a book that's 2,000 years old. But, we're talking about, American history, that was so long ago, we shouldn't focus on any of those things, any of the things that happened. It's like, that wasn't that long ago, people.
Wasn't.
I mean, it's just crazy to me. So how do you, when you think about the whitewashing of history, or you think about, some of the things that have occurred in the past and that look like they might, be reoccurring, aside from the fear and some of the resilience that you talked about, what are some of the things that you think of when you think about like the historical context of some of this?
I lean back into the Green Book.
Yeah.
And that was a resource for communities to be able to find out how to navigate through this nation. And where are people who look like me? Where can I spend my money at? Where can I go to where I can feel safe and secure? And I was talking to my board the other day, and I look to our own program, Proximity, as being that new digital Green Book. This is going to be a resource that professionals can go to identify safe spaces, not just in Kansas City, but our goal is to scale across the nation. But then also have the data bank behind it that shows this is what impact means, this is what impact is, and in a way it be undeniable in spaces. But then you also see people kind of creating new innovative ways within this kind of broken system, right? You hear about all the things that were happening with TikTok and all those other things, and they're now removing African American studies from schools and from colleges. Well, there's a group of historically black professors who have now created what they call Hillman 101, which is them going on and they're teaching black history on TikTok.
Yeah.
And it's free, and these are people coming from your Howard universities. Some of them are from Yale or from these other colleges that are trying to dismantle DEI, but they just finding a different way to get the information out there, and in a way that the youth can be able to see it as well. And so right now, I think more than anything, innovation is going to be the key thing. When you think about our history of innovators that we don't learn about, and the impact that they've had, from peanut butter to stoplights that we all hear about on a regular basis, to hair care products now as well. Innovation is going to be the key, which is why important movements like what you see in Detroit with Black Tech Saturdays. Black Tech Saturdays is a huge movement in Detroit, and an economy that people kind of forgot about, that they didn't see coming back, but is now thriving with such talent and such great ideas, that is now expanding across the nation to where other cities want to mimic those same things. And so I think innovation and having place-based opportunities like Keystone and other innovation districts are going to really drive this new change or this new identity that the black community or other communities will see in this changing economy.
I love it. The second thing I want to ask you about related to this, so we have Mark Irvin on the show. I think his episode's coming out this week. And it was interesting talking to him about his perspective now as someone, with disabilities and someone whose life has changed so fundamentally. But then as we started to get through the interview, one of the things that I wanted to touch on was, all right, now what do you hope your able-bodied community learns from all of this? Now, I know this has been kind of a sensitive topic as it relates to DEI for a while. Post George Floyd, there was a lot of, I think, white people trying to understand and leaning into their black counterparts or to their, black and brown counterparts to say, hey, help me understand. And there was a fatigue that comes with that. It feels like this is maybe going to be a little different this time, because it's less about help me understand than it is about what can I do.
Yeah.
And so what would you say now that fear, uncertainty, and doubt there's no question that it is a huge influencer in people's actions.
Yeah.
When they're afraid, when they're uncertain about something, when there's doubt about the outcomes, that's this psychological thing that changes people's behavior like no other. What would you say to those people who have been allies and maybe now are afraid, based on the repercussions or the things that might happen? What's your message to those people?
Tough skin gets things done. And I think that's the biggest thing right now, is to teach our counterparts how to have the same tough skin and the resiliency that we've always had, because that's going to be important. It's going to be important for when you continue to see these rooms kind of go back to people who look like you. Can you uphold the passion and the culture that was created before these changes happen? One of my colleagues at the DeBruce Foundation, one of the most powerful things that she said to me is that me understanding my bias and understanding that my bias is not going to go away is probably the thing that helped her change her perspective more than anything. There's no way that anybody can apologize their way for what has happened to the culture. There's no way that anybody can just change exactly who they are, and then the feeling that they are when you're in a room with people, the feeling that other people get. You can't change any of that. I think it's the opportunity to understand that when you do say, because you will say something wrong, that you have the tough skin to be corrected, that you have the understanding to know that what you're being corrected about is not an indictment on who you are, but it's a way to get you to be better. Yeah. And I think that the more that our allies understand that and they sit well with that, and the tears are going to come, but just know that you got to wipe your own tears up. You know, I think those become the better allies. Those become the safe spaces now, because it's no longer, I do it automatically by protecting. I'm trying to protect everyone. I want to protect everybody in this space. But there are just some moments that you just can't be protected from. And that's been my entire life. And so I think coming into that understanding of how to deal with that pain and finding ways to accept it and not accept it as an indictment on yourself is going to be the biggest strength that any ally can have.
Yeah, that's rich, man, because I think a lot of people do, you know, like, you kind of have to be sitting that either you lack self-awareness or you think you're already perfect. If you're going to be, you know, if you're not going to be open to that feedback of like, hey, you might have said something wrong, or you might be thinking about something differently, or you should think about this perspective. And if you feel like that's an indictment, then where are you coming from? Man, you know what I mean?
And now you are exactly what what you're trying not to be.
Yeah, without a doubt. You bring up Black Tech Saturdays in Detroit. And so I want to talk about, you know, Black tech and Black innovation and the innovation-led entrepreneurial ecosystem. Because I think over time I've noticed, I think when we started this work, there was, you know, hey, we want to focus on a more equitable entrepreneurial ecosystem, so let's go focus on, you know, just one sector, small business, and just one sector of entrepreneurship. What are your thoughts on? Like, I mean,
I think that's one of those things too, where just like the entrepreneur has to ask questions, the ecosystem has to ask questions. Yep. And I think that there was, when all those things happen, you know, one, we need to identify what's the low-hanging fruit. And so by doing that, I believe it caused people to have the assumptions to believe that majority of the Black community, because they're not exposed to the tech community, or because their initial reaction to the tech community is not something that they see themselves in, the tech community is not meant for them, or the tech community is not something that they're actually interested in. And because historically, you know, we have often only been limited to mom and pop situations, to service-based organizations or service-based businesses. That was where they felt like the resources needed to go, specifically for the Black community. And so like that hyper focus on small businesses created a gap for, you know, real entrepreneurs, or not, I don't want to say real entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs who were not focused on mom and pop, but they wanted to be a part of the tech space. And so there were not a lot of resources, specifically, let's just talk about here in Kansas City. Yep. Not a lot of resources for those type of entrepreneurs, especially those who were past that entry-level stage and they were ready for that growth and scale. They had to move to places like Atlanta or DC to where not only was the ecosystem a little bit more vibrant for them, but then you actually had people who were ready to write checks for those opportunities too. And I mean, and we seen somebody in Kansas City who had a really, really great app. They moved to Atlanta and then they get acquired like almost immediately. And that is I don't think that people understand the power of acquisition. And I think oftentimes in the Black community, acquisition is not something that we want to do because we've been deprived of ownership so much that we don't want to sell our business.
You think of them as lifestyle businesses.
Yeah. But really, this can be in in so many words, or not a many word, this could be a play for me to go out. I got a really dope idea. I got some type of customer traction. And now there's somebody out there who is in the space that I'm in. It's going to be hard for me to go up against them, but because I'm doing what I'm doing so well, they want to buy what I have. And it's all in that negotiation of what that what that price tag could be. But for you to go from a small-time entrepreneur to then tens of millions of dollars or millions of dollars for yourself, not only for yourself, but more than likely in those situations for yourself and employee number 1 through 10.
Yeah.
And have that acquisition happen in your city to where now you can either invest back into, you can build a whole nother business, and maybe it's not even you doing that, but now you have all these other employees who don't have to think about what my next job is going to be. They now have the space and that foundation, like we talked about earlier, to think about, with all this money, what can I do? How can I support? Do I want to fund another nonprofit out there? Do I want to create another idea? Or now I can go work a job and become an investor. Like, there are so many now opportunities that feed the economy, that feed the ecosystem, that as a mom and pop, it takes you so much longer to do. And even in that sense, if you're not talking about product scaling, if you're not talking about multiple locations, then you're truly only serving the neighborhood and the community that you're in a certain amount of square feet in, which again, we need.
Yep.
We need both of those things to happen at the same time. But if you're only focusing on building those mom and pop businesses, then you're missing a whole other sector that can really charge us to close the racial wealth gap, which is what everybody's claim in this work to do, is that we need more money in our households so we can close that gap. And I just don't see how we can do that by only thinking about small business alone.
Yeah, I always try to remind people. Enrico Moretti is an economist that always taught. The Moretti principle is this idea that for every tech job that's created in a community, there are 5, service industry jobs that are created. So if you think about it on a macroeconomics perspective, if you don't have enterprise, if you don't have GDP coming into a community, where's the money go for small? Like, how do you generate the money to support and growing small businesses too? Because to your point, the small business owner, you have to get to a certain place to be able to provide for your family, but then also to generate generational wealth opportunities. Now, the ecosystem, though, when you talk about resource availability, that's one side of it. The other side of it is maybe mindset and culture. And so one of the things we've heard, and I'll use the example of, when we did Mental Health Tuesdays, and Mental Health and Tech Tuesdays, and we got feedback from some of the professionals that the Black community was kind of resistant to technology. I use the same analog with vaccines, those types of things. Absolutely, certain biases probably exist. Absolutely, certain cultural issues exist. But as we move into the future of our economy is innovation led and is going to be centered on technology, or centered on, even for the built environment and some of these other things, trade skills, those are still going to be tech-centric opportunities. What's your thought on the community's take on innovation-led opportunities?
Yeah, I think there is a large portion of our community that understands that there is a change coming and that they need to figure out how to roll with that change. Now, is it foreign? Does it sometimes seem scary? I would say yes in those initial things, but the more that I see, like my mom introduced to ChatGPT, or I see.
How'd that go?
Oh my God, it was. She loved it.
Yeah.
Right. Like she's a person who still writes in cursive.
Yeah.
And is teaching my kids how to write in cursive. But when me and her were going through we did a project together. And I was like, we just gonna throw our thoughts into ChatGPT and let him structure this for us. She realized how this is now an enhancement and not a replacement.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest thing, is that when you are a worker at the Ford plant and you're seeing this new technology come down the pike, you're thinking about, this is gonna replace me. Which, I mean, essentially, you can kind of say, when you think about a Ford plant itself, a plant is nothing but a big robot, all on its own. And every layoff, you come in with a new skill that you have to teach this robot how to do, or you are the person who's correcting what the robot did. And I only know this because I worked in injection molding.
Yeah.
Like, this is what we did. We made parts for people who were on that line. And a lot of it was us making parts for the machines to do, but you still needed that human eye there. But every time it gets a little bit better. It gets a little bit better. And so now me as a person working on that line is no longer thinking about what my skill set is to be in this job, but what is going to be my skill set that I need to work that robot?
Yep.
What is it going to be for me to be that engineer? When we think about McDonald's and the food industry and how most of us now are, when we pull up, there is a robot talking to us.
Yep.
There's not, and then the real person comes in. And even then, their cash register is putting up on the screen the dollars and cents that they need to put out on a regular basis. So you're not even counting on your own anymore, but you're training that computer in its efficiency to do the job that you used to be able, or that you are now doing. When those things become less and less, I've even seen automated burger flippers and automated fry machines.
For sure.
I don't think that people understand the cogs that we are in training these. And so it's more so, again, about just exposing our community to these new technologies that are coming in, and then what are those functionalities going to be, and then how can I skill myself up to be able to now no longer work alone, to work alongside these things and not feel like I'm being a replacement. I think that's the biggest thing, is that we have to start seeing these things as attributes. Again, you're going to have people who are not going to like AI.
Sure.
They're not going to love these things. I think that's across all communities.
Sure, absolutely.
But I do feel like that there is a very young generation that sees it. You know, when you ask them to play like they have a phone in their hand, they go like this. Some of them now just do this to answer a call. And so it's about making sure that they understand the pathways that they're now unfolding for now generations in front of them to kind of see how to adapt in these ways.
Yeah. It's watching your, like hearing your story and like the various pieces that you've picked up and understanding kind of your role. One of the points of this podcast is talk about disruption, right? And I think we can talk about entrepreneurial ecosystems. We can talk about black tech. We can talk about various workforce development. We can talk about those various elements. We can talk about music and social media. I think one of the areas that you and I have always talked about from a disruption perspective is Kansas City. Yeah. So like, what needs to change, man? Like we always talk about Kansas City's on an upswing. Kansas City's, everybody's talking about Kansas City. And I don't know if that's an insular view. When you go out of Kansas City, people are like, Chiefs are good, but like, what else? Like, not everybody knows and not everybody hears that. But when you're in Kansas City and you're doing the work, what needs to change here?
Man, probably a few months ago on social media, on LinkedIn, I made this post, is the moment that Kansas City can get rid of Kansas City nice is the moment that Kansas City will reach its full potential. And in that post, my definition of Kansas City nice is we meet up and we talk about collaboration, we talk about all these great plans, but we don't put the energy to actually implement those plans. Or you're meeting up with somebody and just to kind of hear what their plans are, and then you're pretty much, discrediting them behind their back, or you're not supporting them the way that you actually could or that you agree to behind their back. And it creates this disconnect because on one side you feel like things are going well, things are about to be positive, and then an announcement from something comes down and you're just like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Right. Or you realize that somebody was not being as authentic as they should be, or that they presented that they were in that moment. And that happens cross-culturally, that happens across industry, that happens across our educational institutions, where we are all often at the same table trying to say the same things, but then going our separate ways and just doing what we want to do anyway. And so the moment that we can, I don't even want to say stop doing that, because I feel like the people who do it are just going to always do it. But the moment that we can build up a leadership generation to come in and disrupt that, call it to the carpet on what things are and what things aren't. It's going to take some real contrarians to do that, and people who are not afraid of backlash. I think those are the things that need to happen, have to happen for us to really be successful. Like, we're about to be on the world stage pretty soon.
Yeah.
And I think in those there's going to be times during that time where Kansas City is going to be really exposed when it comes to how it treats people.
Yep.
And then how, I think at times we honor the dollar more than we honor anything else, right? Because you can be that contrarian all day, or you can be that Kansas City nice all day, but the moment that person who you weren't too nice with gets grant dollars or gets access to somebody, now you're back in their good graces, or they're back in your good graces.
Right.
And those are the things that, because when you're circling back, now they have their guard up because they don't know exactly what you want. And it kills the whole entire pathway to reach that shared impact that actually brought y'all to the table together. And so if we could find ways to, navigate around that legacy leadership that really set that tone and empower this new, because there is an opportunity for new leadership. There is an opportunity for new perspectives to come in and really drive change, but they, as individuals, have to have that confidence. They have to have that understanding that they're not doing it by themselves.
Yeah.
That is what's going to really make the change, and that's what's going to help Kansas City become the top 10 city that it should have been a decade ago.
Yeah, no, for sure, facts. So I appreciate that, and I think, I have hope when I look at people. You've been in a lot of these young leader programs and some of these other things, and I think I have a lot of hope when I see people like you saying these things out loud, which is the first step, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's acknowledge that we've got an issue, and let's try to push that change. So appreciate you doing that.
No problem.
So Craig, I got one more question for you. So what's the most unconventional or ridiculous thing that you've ever done that's actually worked?
I had an initial story. I'm not going to tell the story.
All right.
I can't tell the story. I done went through this with the journal before.
Keep it PG with the audience.
I'm going to keep it PG. The most ridiculous thing that I've done was start Proximity.
Oh, okay.
I would say, because it was, one, Black excellence was not something that my wife wanted me to continue on. Because there was that opportunity when Keanu left. It was my decision on whether we were going to continue or not. And I say my wife is my best counselor that I've ever had, and I completely ignored her on that space. But to start an app specifically for Black professionals was, at the time, probably not as risky because that's post-George Floyd and all those resources happening right now. But right now, for me to choose not to change my name, not to change my passion behind it because of how things are changing, I can look back and say, this is a pretty crazy idea. But it's actually working, and it's working better now than it was when we did have funding, because at that time, people were trying to figure out, well, we're trying to fund everybody, and so then how do we fund everybody incrementally? And that wasn't helpful for what I was trying to do, like building an app using Salesforce at that.
Yeah, right.
is an expensive uphill battle. But now communities are understanding the importance of shared data. They're understanding the importance of being in one centralized space, the importance of having a learning management system for people to just not learn in a classroom, but learn at home as well. All of those things were proven during the pandemic, were proven through the post-George Floyd area, and now, especially as DEI gets trickled down, or changed in so many moments, when you are now being a organization who's supported by the government or supported by these corporations, they want to know how this is going to impact their bottom line.
Right.
How is this going to support my ROI? Like, how can diverse ideas, which there are studies out there, but how can I see this in a metric?
Yep.
Like, how can I see this in a spreadsheet? We're able to provide that. And so it's working because people are seeing it. I've had sales calls with organizations that I didn't think were going to take my calls. And so I'm just super excited to see what the potential of that's going to be.
Well, it's good to see ridiculous ideas work, man.
Man, it
so,
is.
yeah. Hey, thanks for being our first studio guest for the Disruption
Man,
Lab.
thanks for having me. I'm
I
excited.
appreciate it. Like I said, man, I'm a huge fan. I've always been. I tell people I wouldn't be doing this work if it wasn't for you, and I mean that, man. So I appreciate your partnership, and I appreciate your friendship.
Man, same, man. I appreciate you. I don't think people understand the space that you were able to provide Black excellence to really grow. I think I referred to this a lot of different times, like even as individuals, but as organizations. When you're trying to build, it's important to have a foundation. It's important to have good resources and connections, and many of times you've been able to be that for us. So I appreciate you as well.
Well, man, I'll do whatever I can. So.